A woman who had given 18 years of her life to a marriage discovered that her husband had been living a second life the entire time. And what happened next destroyed everything he believed about her. Nadine pretended to lose everything in the divorce, the house, the cars, the savings, to test the one person she thought she could trust. What she found out didn't just break her heart, it rearranged the entire truth of her life. Good to have you here, friends. Please like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Tell us where you're joining from in the comments. Atlanta, London, maybe Ghana or Barbados? We're curious. Now pay attention to what happens in this story. Because there is a moment coming, a single, quiet moment, where everything you think you understand about these people is going to flip completely upside down. Her name was Nadine Elizabeth Parker. She was 44 years old.
A tall woman, 5'9", with warm brown skin that glowed in the right light. Skin she took care of every night with cocoa butter, the same way her mother had done, and her grandmother before that. 3 generations of women, same jar of cocoa butter, same slow circles on the arms and hands before bed. Nadine had dark eyes that were calm on the surface, but held something steady and fierce underneath, like embers buried deep in ash. You wouldn't see the fire unless you looked closely. Most people never looked closely at Nadine. That was their mistake. Her hair was natural, cut short and close to her head. She had done it 3 years ago in a salon on a Wednesday afternoon, walked in with hair past her shoulders, and walked out with barely an inch of tight, dark curls. When she got home that evening, her husband Robert looked at her from across the kitchen and said, "Why would you do that? You looked better with long hair." He said it the way you might comment on a piece of furniture you didn't like, casually, carelessly, like her appearance was a decoration in his house that he had a right to approve. Nadine didn't respond. She looked at herself in the hallway mirror, and for the first time in a long time, she liked what she saw. Not because the haircut made her beautiful. She had always been beautiful. But because the haircut was something she had chosen for herself, and she had almost forgotten what that felt like. She had a habit of pressing her thumb against her ring finger when she was thinking. The pad of her thumb would find the thin groove where her wedding band sat. 18 years of metal on skin had left a permanent dent, and she would rub it slowly back and forth, like she was trying to smooth a wrinkle out of fabric. She had been doing it for so long, she didn't even notice when she was doing it. Her hands were soft but strong. She had played piano when she was younger, before the children came, and her fingers still had that wide, reaching spread, always stretching for something, even when there was nothing to reach for. Nadine lived in a brick colonial house on Winding Creek Lane in a suburb of Charlotte, North Carolina. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, a 2-car garage where Robert's black sedan sat beside Nadine's silver minivan, which had a dent in the rear bumper from the time Marcus was learning to drive and misjudged the mailbox. The backyard had a wooden fence that Robert said he would restain every spring, but never did, and a magnolia tree that bloomed white every May and dropped thick, waxy petals all over the lawn. The neighborhood was the kind where people waved from their driveways and jogged with their dogs at 6 in the morning and kept their opinions about their neighbors to themselves. Nobody on Winding Creek Lane asked what was going on behind anyone else's front door. That was the unspoken rule. Smile, wave, mind your business. The house smelled like lavender. Nadine kept small dried sachets in every room, in dresser drawers and linen closets, and on the shelf behind the couch. And coffee. Because Nadine brewed a fresh pot every single morning at 5:30, whether it was a weekday or a weekend, whether the sun was shining or the rain was beating against the kitchen window. She poured exactly 2 cups into a ceramic mug that said Mom Fuel on the side. Marcus had given it to her for Mother's Day when he was 9, and she sat at the kitchen table and she drank those 2 cups before anyone else in the house was awake. Those 2 cups of coffee in that quiet kitchen with the early light coming through the window above the sink. That was Nadine's time. It was the only time in the entire day that belonged completely, entirely, uninterruptedly to her. She guarded it the way you guard something precious. Because it was precious. It was the 30 minutes where she was not a wife or a mother or a chauffeur or a cook or an invisible woman standing in a house that was slowly becoming someone else's plan. She was just Nadine. And Nadine needed coffee and silence the way a plant needs water and light. She had 2 children,
Her son, Marcus, was 17, tall and lean like his mother, with a serious face that could turn playful in a heartbeat, and an easy laugh that came out of nowhere and startled you every time. A big, sudden, full-body laugh that made everyone around him smile whether they wanted to or not. Marcus played basketball at school, not because he was the best on the team, he wasn't, he was the fourth or fifth man off the bench most games, but because he loved the rhythm of it, the sound of the ball hitting the hardwood, the squeak of rubber soles on a polished floor, the echo in the gym when it was empty and he was just shooting free throws by himself, one after another, finding the pattern. He was a junior and already thinking about college, circling schools in a thick guidebook Nadine had bought him from the bookstore on Main Street. He kept the guidebook on his nightstand next to a framed photograph of Nadine holding him as a baby, both of them laughing at something nobody remembered anymore. He never moved that photograph. Not once. Her daughter Zoe was 12. Small for her age, with her father's light brown eyes and her mother's way of watching a room before saying a word. Zoe was the kind of child who noticed things that other people missed. A crack in the sidewalk shaped like a letter. A bird sitting on a power line facing the wrong direction. The way someone's smile didn't quite match their eyes. She loved animals, dogs especially. Every Saturday morning, while other 12-year-olds were sleeping in or watching screens, Zoe volunteered at the county animal shelter on Fairview Road. She walked the dogs that nobody else wanted to walk, the old ones with gray muzzles and cloudy eyes, the ones with 3 legs or bad hips or nervous temperaments that made them tremble when you reached for them. She would come home smelling like kibble and wet fur and disinfectant, with her jeans muddy at the knees, and Nadine would hug her anyway and say, "How were your babies today?" And Zoe would tell her about every single one, by name, because she had learned their names, every one, because Zoe believed that knowing someone's name was the first step toward saving them. And then there was Robert Allen Parker, 46 years old, Nadine's husband of 18 years. And that is the thing about trust. Once it cracks, no matter how carefully you press the pieces back together, you can always see the line where the break was. You can always feel it under your fingers. Robert was a good-looking man. Everyone said so. 6'1", broad shoulders, smooth, dark skin, a smile that could fill a room and make every person in it feel like they were the one he was smiling at. He wore tailored shirts to work. French blue was his favorite, always ironed, always crisp. And he kept his beard trimmed short and geometric, a perfect line along his jaw that he maintained with a straight razor every morning. His shoes were always polished, black Oxfords on weekdays, brown loafers on weekends. He smelled like sandalwood cologne, a new one, not the one Nadine used to buy him for his birthday. Robert worked as a regional sales director for a medical supply company, which meant he traveled. A lot. 2 or 3 weeks out of every month. Houston on Monday, Chicago on Wednesday, Miami on Friday. The kitchen calendar was a patchwork of his flights and hotels and conference names. Nadine had long ago stopped trying to keep track of where he was on any given night. She just asked, "When will you be home?" And he would say Tuesday or Thursday, or sometimes he would say he wasn't sure. That was the rhythm of their marriage. Robert coming and going. Suitcases zipped and unzipped. Kisses at the front door that got shorter every year, that shrank from the kind of kiss that says, "I'll miss you," to the kind that says, "I have to go," to the kind that is really just lips moving near skin, emotion without meaning, a habit neither of them had bothered to break. For a long time, Nadine told herself the distance was normal, that every marriage went through seasons, that busy was not the same as gone. She told herself this the way you tell yourself a sound in the night is just the house settling, not because you really believe it, but because the alternative is too frightening to look at directly. But the truth had been leaking in through the cracks for years, like water through a basement wall, slow and quiet and steady, and by the time you noticed the floor was wet, the damage was already done. Small things at first. A receipt folded in the pocket of his pants. She always checked the pockets before doing laundry. From a restaurant in Miami called Aurelia's. She had never heard of it. She looked it up. It was a candlelit Italian place on Brickell Avenue with a prix-fixe menu that cost $160 per person. For two. A phone call he took outside in the driveway at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night. She watched from the bedroom window. He paced back and forth along the fence line with his phone pressed to his ear and his free hand in his pocket. And when he came back inside, he said, "Work thing. A new cologne. Sandalwood instead of the cedar she had bought him for 10 years. She asked him about it once, casually, and he said, "I picked it up at the airport." She checked the brand online later. It wasn't sold at airports. The way he started keeping his phone face down on every surface, the nightstand, the kitchen counter, the arm of the couch, always face down, always silent. He had never done that before. The way he stopped reaching for her hand when they walked. And then the bigger things. A credit card statement with a charge for $270 at a jewelry store in Houston. Nadine didn't have new jewelry. She hadn't received a gift in over a year. She looked at the date. It was a Thursday. She checked the family calendar. Robert had been in Houston for a sales conference. She said nothing. A hotel booking confirmation that arrived in the family email account. 2 nights at a boutique hotel called the Indigo in Savannah, Georgia. King Suite. Robert had told Nadine he was in Dallas that weekend. He had said it casually over breakfast. Heading to Dallas for a meeting with the Southwest team. And she had nodded and said, "Safe travels." She checked his flight records later, using the airline rewards app that was still linked to her phone from when they used to book family vacations together. Robert had not flown to Dallas that month. He had flown to Savannah. Nadine did not confront him. Pay close attention to that, because it matters. She did not scream. She did not cry. She did not throw a plate across the kitchen or lock him out or call his mother or drive to Savannah to find the hotel herself. She sat at the kitchen table at 5:30 the next morning with her 2 cups of coffee, and she looked out the window at the magnolia tree, bare and still, waiting for spring. And she thought. She thought the way a financial analyst thinks, in patterns, in numbers, in what the evidence showed versus what the story claimed. And then Nadine Elizabeth Parker began to plan. And that single decision set off a chain of events nobody could stop. Now Nadine had a best friend. Her name was Corinne Marshall. They had been close since they were 22 years old when they both worked at Belk department store in downtown Charlotte. Nadine in women's accessories, Corinne in shoes. They spent their lunch breaks eating turkey sandwiches on a bench outside the loading dock, talking about boys and money and what they wanted their lives to look like at 40. Corinne was the maid of honor at Nadine's wedding. She was in the hospital room when Marcus was born, holding Nadine's left hand while the doctor held the other. She was there when Zoe was born too, taking photographs with a disposable camera and crying harder than Nadine. She came over every Sunday morning for brunch. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, coffee. She knew where Nadine kept her spare key, hidden under the ceramic frog by the back door. She knew what medication Nadine took for her migraines, sumatriptan, 50 milligrams. And she knew the name of the boy who broke Nadine's heart in 10th grade. A boy named Derek. Nadine hadn't thought about Derek in 25 years, but Corinne still brought him up sometimes as a joke. Corinne was 43, short and loud and funny, with dyed auburn hair she refreshed every 6 weeks and earrings that were always slightly too big for her face. Hoops and dangles and statement pieces that caught the light when she turned her head. She laughed from deep in her belly, a laugh that took over her whole body and made everyone around her smile. She sold real estate and she was very good at it. Top agent in her brokerage 3 years running, a fact she mentioned at least once per brunch. She drove a white SUV with a bumper sticker that said, "Blessed and busy," and she never left the house without a full face of makeup and a stainless steel travel mug full of green tea. Nadine trusted Corinne with her life. That is not something people say lightly, and Nadine did not say it lightly. She had literally told Corinne years ago, sitting on this same porch, watching the kids play in the yard, "If anything ever happens to me, a car accident, an illness, anything, you are the person I trust to take care of Marcus and Zoe." Corinne had cried. She had set down her green tea and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her mascara, and she said, "I would protect them with my life. Remember that. Hold it in your mind, because that promise is going to come back around, and when it does, it's going to cut deeper than anything Robert ever did." Nadine's plan had 3 parts. The first was the hardest, because it required her to admit out loud what she had been whispering to herself in the dark for months. She went to see a lawyer, a woman named Terry Okafor. Terry was a family attorney with an office downtown, 3rd floor, with a window that looked out over a parking garage and a waiting room that smelled like lemon disinfectant. Terry had a reputation for 3 things. She was thorough, she was aggressive, and she was discreet. She did not gossip. She did not post about her cases. She did not make small talk. She won. Nadine sat in the leather chair across from Terry's desk, and she told her everything. She spoke for 45 minutes without stopping. The receipts, the restaurant in Miami, the phone calls in the driveway, the new cologne that wasn't sold at airports, the credit card charge at the jewelry store, the hotel in Savannah, the flights that didn't match the stories. She laid it all out the way she would have laid out a financial report. Organized, detailed, unemotional. Terry listened without moving. When Nadine finished, Terry leaned back in her chair, folded her hands and said, "What do you want, Nadine?" Nadine said, "I want to know the truth. All of it. Every corner. Every hidden thing. Before I make a single decision about my future, I need to know exactly what I'm deciding about." Terry nodded. She recommended a private investigator, a man named Dennis Childs. Dennis was 58 years old, gray-haired, soft-spoken, with the steady patience of a man who had spent 22 years as a police detective before going private. He wore reading glasses on a chain around his neck, and he carried a leather notebook that was worn soft at the edges. He did not judge the people he investigated. He just found facts the way a dog finds a scent, quietly, persistently, without stopping until the trail ended. Dennis went to work. 3 weeks of surveillance, record searches, financial tracing, and old-fashioned legwork. What he found was worse than Nadine had prepared herself for. Robert had been having an affair for 2 years. The woman's name was Monica Vance. She was 31. She worked in pharmaceutical sales. She was pretty. Nadine saw the photographs in the report, and she noted this the way you note the weather, without emotion, just observation. Monica lived in a 1-bedroom condo in Buckhead, a nice neighborhood in Atlanta. The rent was $1,900 a month. Robert was paying it. Every single month. $1,900 transferred on the first of the month from a bank account Nadine had never heard of. A separate account at a different bank, opened using Robert's business address. The monthly payments were disguised on his company expenses as vendor payments to a consulting firm that did not exist. But Dennis found something else. Something that hit Nadine harder than the affair, harder than the photographs, harder than the condo in Buckhead. Robert was hiding money. A lot of money. Over the past 4 years, he had quietly diverted $340,000 from their shared financial life into the hidden account. Bonus checks that should have been deposited into joint savings. Commission payments from his best sales quarters that Nadine never saw. Stock options that had vested and been cashed out without her knowledge or signature. $340,000 that should have gone into their savings, into Marcus and Zoe's college funds, into the life they were supposed to be building together. Diverted, hidden, locked behind a password and a post office box on the other side of town that Nadine had never seen and would never have found. Nadine sat in Terry's office on a Tuesday afternoon and read the report. 26 pages, photographs, bank records, flight manifests, screenshots of credit card statements. She read every page. She read some of them twice. She did not cry. Her thumb found the groove on her ring finger, and she pressed it, slow and steady, and she said, "What are my options?" Terry laid them out. Under North Carolina law, marital assets were subject to equitable distribution. The hidden accounts were marital property. The rent payments to Monica's condo could be classified as dissipation of marital assets, meaning Robert had wasted shared money on a personal relationship. Nadine had strong grounds for a highly favorable divorce settlement. Very strong. But here's what matters, Terry said. If Robert finds out you know, he'll move the money overnight. He'll close the accounts. He'll transfer funds offshore or to a friend's account or to Monica's name. He'll hire a shark of a lawyer and start a war of paper that could take 2 years and cost you everything you're trying to protect. If you want to win this, you have to be strategic. You have to be patient. And you have to be quiet. Nadine almost smiled. I've been quiet for 18 years. I can be quiet a little longer. And she was. Because Nadine Parker was not just a stay-at-home mother who made coffee and drove carpool. Before she had children, she had worked for 6 years as a financial analyst at First National Bank.
She understood money the way some people understand music. Its rhythms, its patterns, the way it moved, and where it hid when someone was trying to keep it out of sight. She could read a balance sheet the way Zoe read a dog's body language, naturally, instinctively, seeing what most people missed. She had left the bank when Marcus was born because Robert said they could afford for her to stay home. You deserve to be with the kids, he had said, and she had believed him because she wanted to. Now she understood the other reason he wanted her home. It was easier to hide money from someone who wasn't looking at spreadsheets all day. But Nadine was looking now, and she saw everything. She spent the next 6 weeks preparing, quietly, slowly, the way you handle something explosive, one careful step at a time, no sudden movements, breathing steady. She opened a personal bank account at a credit union across town. She transferred her small inheritance from her mother, $42,000, and the savings bonds she had purchased for the children years ago, into protected positions. She made copies of every financial document in the house, tax returns from the last 7 years, investment statements, mortgage records, Robert's pay stubs, which he kept in a manila folder in the bottom drawer of his home office desk. She photographed every page with her phone and uploaded them to a secure cloud account that Robert knew nothing about. She did all of this while cooking dinner and driving Marcus to practice and picking Zoe up from the shelter and folding laundry and smiling at Robert across the table and saying, "How was Houston?" the same way she always had, in the same voice, with the same expression, not one hair out of place. Robert noticed nothing. And that is the thing about people who lie. They are so busy managing their own deception that they forget to watch for anyone else's.
They assume the world is as careless as they are. But what Nadine was about to discover would change everything she thought she knew. Not about Robert, about Corinne. It was a Thursday afternoon in April. Robert was traveling. Marcus was at practice. Zoe was at a friend's house. The house was empty and quiet. Nadine was in the master closet, sorting through old boxes on the top shelf, part of her slow, steady process of organizing every room before the life she knew ended. When she found Robert's old personal laptop, the silver one he used to carry everywhere before his company gave him a new machine 2 years ago. It was shoved behind a stack of winter sweaters on the top shelf, buried like something that was supposed to stay hidden. Nadine pulled it down. The battery was dead. She found the charger in the junk drawer in the kitchen, plugged it in, and waited. When the screen lit up, the browser opened automatically. It was logged into an email account Nadine had never seen, a Gmail address that was just a random string of letters and numbers. No name attached, no photograph, just letters and numbers and a full inbox. Nadine scrolled through it slowly. Most of the messages were correspondence with Monica, logistics, plans, hotel bookings, restaurant reservations. The language was warm, intimate, familiar. Nadine had already seen all of this in Dennis's report. It hurt, but it was old hurt now. A bruise she had already pressed on enough to know its shape. Then she found a different thread. A different name. A name that made her stop breathing. Corinne. Nadine's hands went cold. The blood left her face so fast she felt dizzy. She gripped the edge of the kitchen table with one hand and scrolled with the other. The emails were between Robert and Corinne. They went back 14 months. They were not romantic. They were not an affair. They were something worse. They were a partnership. Corinne had known about the affair. She had known for over a year. Robert had told her, or perhaps she had discovered it on her own. The emails were not entirely clear. And instead of telling Nadine, her best friend, the woman who trusted her with her children's lives, Corinne had kept the secret. But it was not just silence. The emails showed that Corinne had actively helped Robert hide the affair. She had provided alibis on at least 4 occasions, texting Nadine to say that Robert was at a dinner she had attended with him, or that she had seen Robert at a networking event, when in reality, Robert was somewhere else entirely. She had covered for him. She had lied to Nadine's face on Sunday mornings over scrambled eggs and coffee. And then Nadine found the email that destroyed what was left of her faith in other people. It was from Robert to Corinne, dated 3 months ago. It read, "Thanks for keeping this between us. I know it's not easy. When the house sells, I'll make sure you get the full referral fee on the listing. You've earned it."
The house. Robert was planning to push for a divorce and sell their home. And Corinne, her maid of honor, the woman who cried at both her children's births, the woman who sat on her porch and swore to protect her children, was going to list the house and take a commission. She was going to profit from the destruction of Nadine's family. Nadine closed the laptop. She sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet and her knees pulled to her chest, and she pressed her thumb against the groove on her ring finger until the skin turned white. She did not cry. She was somewhere beyond tears. She was in the place where the water is so deep and so still that the surface doesn't move at all, and all the storms are happening underneath where nobody can see. Her husband was stealing from her. Her best friend was helping him do it. And they were planning to sell her home while she smiled and poured coffee and believed she was loved. But Nadine Parker was not a woman who fell apart.
She was a woman who sat at kitchen tables and made plans. And that is exactly what she did. Now here is where the 2 rivers of this story come rushing toward Nadine at the same time, and she had to stand in the middle and keep her footing while both tried to pull her under. On one side was Robert. He came home the following week and sat Nadine down at the kitchen table, the table where she drank her coffee, the table where she found the truth, the table that held the whole weight of their life. And he said, in a voice rehearsed smooth as silk, "Nadine, I think we've grown apart. I think it's time for us to talk about separating." He didn't mention Monica. He didn't mention the hidden accounts. He didn't mention the $340,000 or the condo in Buckhead or the 2 years of lies. He sat there with his hands folded on the table and his face arranged into something that was supposed to look like sadness, but looked to Nadine like a mask with the strings showing. "I've already spoken to an attorney," Robert said. "He's prepared a settlement agreement. It's fair. 50-50 split of all assets. You keep your car, I keep mine. We sell the house and divide the equity. Joint custody of Marcus and Zoe." Nadine studied his face, the face she had loved for 20 years, the face that had lied to her for at least the last 2. 50-50, she repeated. "It's the fairest approach," he said. Fair. He used that word. The man who had secretly moved $340,000 out of their shared life used the word fair. Nadine pressed her thumb against the groove. She took a slow breath. She let the silence hang in the kitchen for 5 full seconds. And then she said the word that Robert never expected. "Okay." Robert blinked. "Okay?"
I'll read the papers tonight.
Robert's mouth opened slightly. He had rehearsed for this conversation. He had prepared for tears, for shouting, for accusations and thrown dishes and slammed doors. He had not prepared for a calm woman who said, "Okay," and stood up from the table. That's really mature, Nadine. I think this is the right decision for both of us." "I'm sure you do," Nadine said softly, and she walked out of the kitchen. She read the settlement papers that night. They were exactly what Terry had predicted. Robert's financial disclosure was a lie. The hidden account was not mentioned. His claimed income was $40,000 below what Dennis had documented. The house was valued at $30,000 under its actual market price, the exact kind of lowball number a real estate agent might suggest if she wanted a quick sale and a quiet commission. Corinne's fingerprints were all over the math.
On the other side was Corinne herself, still showing up every Sunday for brunch,
Still sitting at Nadine's kitchen table, still eating the eggs Nadine scrambled and drinking the coffee Nadine poured, and looking across the table with a face full of concern, asking, How are you and Robert doing, girl? Everything okay at home? Nadine watched her. Every Sunday. She watched the way Corinne's eyes flickered away when Robert's name was mentioned, quick as a hummingbird. She watched the way Corinne redirected conversations about money towards safer ground. New restaurants, neighborhood gossip, a house she had just listed. She watched the way Corinne checked her phone under the table when she thought Nadine was refilling her mug. And Nadine said nothing. She smiled. She poured more coffee. She played the role of a woman who didn't know anything, because that was the most powerful position in any room. The person who sees everything while everyone else assumes she is blind. But the biggest secret hadn't come out yet. While Robert and Corinne believed they were in control, Nadine and Terry were building a case that would take apart everything they had constructed. Terry filed a motion for full financial discovery, a legal order requiring both parties to disclose every asset, every account, every source of income under oath. If Robert lied on the sworn disclosure, which he had already done in his proposed settlement, he would be committing perjury. And Terry had every document, every bank statement, every wire transfer receipt that Dennis had uncovered, organized in binders and ready to present. Terry also filed a motion to freeze the hidden account immediately, preventing Robert from moving or withdrawing the money before the court could review it. And then Nadine did something that surprised even Terry. She called Corinne. "Can you come over tonight? I need to talk to you about something." Corinne arrived at 7. She walked into the kitchen the way she always did. Big earrings, green tea in her travel mug, a hug that lasted exactly 3 seconds. She sat in her usual chair. She crossed her legs. She smiled. Nadine poured her a cup of coffee. She sat down across the table. She placed a plain manila folder between them. "What's this?" Corinne asked, still smiling. "Open it." Corinne opened the folder. Inside were printed copies of every email, every single message between Robert and Corinne over the past 14 months, the alibis, the cover stories, the logistics of deception, the email about the house and the referral fee, all of it. Printed, organized, labeled with dates. Corinne's smile didn't fade. It collapsed, like a building coming down from the inside. Her face went from warm brown to ashen gray. The papers rattled in her trembling hands. "Nadine, I can explain this. It isn't what it—" "No," Nadine said. Her voice was calm, the way deep water is calm. Still on the surface, powerful underneath. "You can't explain this, because there is nothing you can say that will make this make sense. I trusted you with my children. I told you that if I died, you were the person I wanted to raise Marcus and Zoe. I said those words to you on my porch, and you cried and said you would protect them with your life. And then you helped the man who was robbing their future." Corinne was crying now. Real tears, the kind that come with shaking shoulders and ruined mascara and sounds that aren't quite words. "He told me if I said anything he said he would." "What? What could Robert possibly threaten you with that would be worse than what you did to me? You sat at this table, every Sunday. You ate my food. You looked at my face. You asked me how my marriage was. And you knew. You knew and you chose silence. Not because you were afraid, because you were counting the commission on my house." Corinne stared at the emails. She had nothing to say. Because some betrayals are so complete that language cannot contain them. There are no words big enough to fill the hole that a broken promise leaves behind. Nadine stood up. "I'm not going to shout at you. I'm not going to curse at you or throw things or make a scene. That's not who I am. That was never who I am. I'm just going to tell you the truth, and then I'm going to ask you to leave my house for the last time." She looked at the woman she had called her sister for 22 years. The woman she had shared a bench with outside the loading dock at Belk's, eating turkey sandwiches and dreaming about the future. "The worst part of all this is not that Robert cheated. I can survive infidelity. People do. The worst part is that you let me keep trusting you. Every Sunday, every brunch, every cup of coffee I poured for you in this kitchen. You sat across from me, and you held the knife behind your back and you smiled. And that is the part I will carry with me, Corinne. Not his betrayal. Yours. Because his I should have expected. but yours I never saw coming. And it's the ones you don't see coming that leave the deepest marks. Corinne stood. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out except a small, broken sound. She picked up her purse. She left the travel mug on the table. She walked to the front door, and she left. Nadine stood in her kitchen alone. The house was quiet. The lavender in the air, the coffee on the counter, the folder on the table. She pressed her thumb against her ring finger one more time. Then she washed both coffee cups, dried them, and put them in the cabinet. The court date arrived on a warm Tuesday in June. 4th floor, Mecklenburg County Courthouse. Tall windows, fluorescent lights, the smell of old paper and floor wax.
Robert arrived with his attorney, a man in a dark suit with silver cufflinks who looked expensive and walked with the confidence of a person who had never been surprised in a courtroom. They sat on the left. Robert was wearing a new tie. He looked calm. He believed this was going to be simple. Nadine arrived with Terry. They sat on the right. Nadine wore a simple navy dress and the small gold earrings her mother had given her on her wedding day. She placed her hands in her lap. She breathed. She waited. Robert's attorney presented first. The 50-50 settlement, the house sale, the joint custody, the financial disclosure that was missing $340,000 and an entire secret life. Then Terry stood up. She presented Dennis's report to the judge. 26 pages. The hidden bank account, the monthly transfers, the rent on Monica's condo, the stock options that were cashed and never reported, the falsified income.
Terry placed each document before the court, the way you lay bricks, one on top of another, steady, level, building something that could not be knocked down. Robert's composure cracked. The calm slid off his face like paint in the rain. He leaned to his lawyer and whispered something urgent. His lawyer's jaw tightened. He whispered back. Robert's hands went flat on the table, pressing down hard, like he was trying to hold himself in his chair. Terry also presented the emails. Robert and Corinne's entire collaboration. The alibis. The plan to undervalue and sell the house. The referral fee. She presented them as evidence, not accusations. Calm. Factual, documented, every word printable, every fact verifiable. Robert looked across the courtroom at Nadine. For the first time in their entire marriage, he saw her clearly. Not as the quiet woman who made his coffee and drove his children and stayed home while he built a second life. He saw her as the woman who had sat across from him at that kitchen table, who had said, "Okay," with a face as calm as glass, who had known everything, and had not said a single word. The expression on his face was not anger. It was fear. The specific fear of a man who realizes that the person he underestimated was the one person he should have been watching. Nadine held his gaze. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She looked at him the way you look at a chapter in a book that you have finished reading and are ready to close. With understanding, with sadness, and with the quiet certainty that you are never going back to that page. The judge reviewed the materials carefully. She took nearly 20 minutes with the financial documents alone. She asked Robert's attorney 3 pointed questions about the undisclosed accounts. The answers came out thin and halting, like air from a tire going flat. Robert's lawyer tugged at his collar. Robert stared at the table. The ruling came 2 weeks later. Nadine received 70% of the marital assets, including the full value of the hidden accounts. She kept the house. She was awarded primary custody of Marcus and Zoe, with Robert granted visitation after completing a court-ordered financial accountability course. Robert was ordered to reimburse the dissipated marital assets and to pay Nadine's legal fees in full. Robert walked out of the courthouse without looking at anyone. His expensive lawyer walked a step behind him, already talking into his phone. Nadine stood on the courthouse steps in the June sun. She took off her wedding ring. She held it in her palm for a moment, turning it slowly, feeling its weight. Lighter than she expected. She put it in her purse, and she walked to her car. The groove on her ring finger, that thin, worn dent where 18 years of metal had pressed into her skin, would take time to fade. But it would fade. Now let me tell you what happened next, because this is the part that makes the whole story matter. Nadine went home. She parked in the driveway and sat in her car for a few minutes, looking at the brick house with the magnolia tree and the dented bumper where Marcus misjudged the mailbox. Then she went inside and she brewed a pot of coffee, and she sat at the kitchen table and she drank 2 cups in the quiet afternoon light. Marcus came home from practice. He dropped his gym bag by the door the way he always did and sat down across from her. He was 17, old enough to know what had happened without being told the details, old enough to be angry. He had his mother's serious face and his own version of her steady fire. "Mom," he said, "are you okay?" Nadine looked at her son. His face, his careful eyes, the college guidebook tucked under his arm, the photograph on his nightstand that he never moved. "I'm going to be," she said. "It's going to take time. Some things do. But I am going to be okay." Marcus was quiet. Then he said, "I need you to know something. I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at Dad. But I'm not going to let what he did turn me into something I don't want to be. You raised me better than that, and I'm going to make sure Zoe knows that too." Nadine reached across the table and held her son's hand. She didn't speak. Some moments are bigger than words. They just need someone strong enough to sit in them. Zoe came home later, smelling like dogs and happiness, and she climbed into Nadine's lap, which she was technically too big for, her legs hanging off the side of the chair, and she said, "Mama, I walked a 3-legged dog today named Chester. He only has 3 legs, but he runs faster than every other dog in the yard. He doesn't even care that he's missing one. He just runs." Nadine laughed. A real laugh. The first one in months. Full and sudden. The kind that starts in your belly and surprises you. She wrapped her arms around Zoe and kissed the top of her head and thought about Chester, the 3-legged dog who ran faster than everyone because nobody had ever told him he was supposed to be slow. Over the year that followed, Nadine rebuilt her life piece by piece. Not in a rush, not in a frenzy. Slowly and deliberately, the same way she had taken it apart. One careful decision at a time. She went back to work. She took a position as a financial advisor at a small firm downtown that specialized in helping women going through transitions, divorces, deaths, career changes, sudden widowhood. Women who had trusted someone else with their money for years and suddenly found themselves sitting across a desk from a banker who spoke a language they had never learned. Nadine understood that particular kind of fear because she had lived inside of it. She had sat in that chair, and she turned her experience into something that could help someone else survive what she had survived. Her first client was a woman named Denise, 51, whose husband had left her after 26 years. Denise cried in Nadine's office for 15 minutes before she could speak. Nadine handed her a tissue and said, "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." And she meant it. She turned the guest bedroom into a home office with a desk by the window and a small bookshelf she filled with financial guides and novels. She replanted the garden. She drove Marcus to college visits up and down the coast, arguing about music in the car and stopping for bad fast food at gas stations. She helped Zoe adopt Chester, the 3-legged dog, from the shelter. The adoption paperwork cost $65. It was the best $65 Nadine had ever spent. Chester slept at the foot of Zoe's bed every night, snoring softly, his 3 legs twitching in dreams. He chewed through 2 pairs of Nadine's shoes in the first month. She looked at the ruined shoes, and she laughed, and she bought cheaper ones. Some things mattered. Shoes were not one of them. She did not hear from Corinne again. No call, no text, no card, no Sunday brunch. The travel mug sat on the table for 3 days before Nadine put it in a box and set the box on the curb with the recycling. The silence where Corinne used to be was loud at first, like a missing tooth your tongue keeps finding. Then it was just space, and then it was just normal. One evening in December, Nadine was sitting on the front porch in her coat, watching the streetlights come on along Winding Creek Lane. The magnolia was bare. The air was cold and smelled like chimney smoke from somewhere down the block. Zoe came outside wrapped in a blanket with Chester under one arm and sat down beside her mother. "Mama," Zoe said, Can I ask you something? Always, baby. Do you still love Daddy? Nadine looked at the bare magnolia.
She looked at the sky turning dark above the rooftops. She thought about the question the way she thought about everything, carefully, from every angle, until she found the honest answer. I love who your father was when we started, she said. I love the man who held you when you were born and cried because he was so happy. I love the man who taught Marcus to ride a bike in this driveway and fell down twice trying to show him how. But love isn't just a feeling, Zoe. It's a choice you make every day. And your father stopped choosing us a long time before I stopped hoping he would start again. Zoe leaned her head against Nadine's shoulder. Chester yawned and settled deeper into the blanket. The streetlights glowed warm against the cold dark. Mama, Zoe said softly, I think you're the bravest person I know. Because you didn't yell or throw things or try to hurt him back. You just got quiet and figured it all out by yourself. And I think that's harder than fighting. I think being quiet when you're that angry is the hardest thing in the world.
Nadine pulled her daughter close and held her on that cold December porch with the bare magnolia standing over them like a patient guardian waiting for spring. Because Zoe, at 12 years old, with her father's eyes and her mother's silence and her way of loving damaged things, three-legged dogs and bruised hearts and broken families, had just named the thing Nadine had spent the past year learning the hard way. That real strength is not noise. That real courage is not a fight. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is sit at a kitchen table at 5:30 in the morning with 2 cups of coffee and the quiet truth and decide, calmly, clearly, without breaking anything except the lock on a life you have outgrown, to build something new from whatever remains. And Nadine had built something new. Not perfect, not finished, but standing. And hers. Every brick of it. Hers.
And that's where we'll leave this story. If it touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what lesson did you take from this? See you next time.